HOA set my suspension bridge on fire to trap me. They had no idea who they provoked. Hello, everyone. Before we begin today's story, we would like to ask you for one small favor. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so you will not miss any of our latest videos. It only takes a moment, costs nothing, and is one of the best ways to help us continue creating powerful, emotional, and dramatic stories like this one. Your support means more to us than you can imagine. Also, let us know where you are watching from today. Share your city or country in the comments below. Thank you so much. Now, let us return to our main character. The people who burn bridges usually assume they're standing on the safe side. The first cable snapped at 2:17 in the morning. The sound tore across Caldwell Gorge like a rifle shot, hard enough to shake dust from the rafters above my bed. I opened my eyes to darkness, a pulsing red glow against the bedroom wall, and the sharp taste of smoke already coating my tongue. Then the wind pushed the smell through the window. Burning pine, melting insulation, gasoline. I was moving before the alarm began screaming. My bare feet struck the cold floorboards. I grabbed my field jacket, flashlight, and radio, then shoved through the porch door into air hot enough to sting my face. Grace Bridge was on fire. Flames rolled across the wooden deck in long orange waves, feeding on 58 years of dry timber and mountain wind. Sparks spiraled above the gorge like glowing insects. The steel suspension cables stretched through the fire, black against the night, trembling under the changing load. Grace was the only vehicle crossing between my property and the county road. My truck was parked on the far side. So were the generator fuel, medical supplies, and emergency satellite unit. Another cable groaned. People imagine steel failing with a clean metallic crack. It doesn't. It stretches first, complains. It releases a low, wounded sound that travels through the structure and into your ribs. Then it breaks. The western edge of the bridge dropped 6 feet. Burning planks twisted loose and fell into the gorge, spinning through darkness until the creek swallowed them below. Heat pressed against my eyes. Smoke dragged tears down my cheeks, but I didn't look away. I had spent 18 years studying how bridges failed. This one had been helped. My phone vibrated inside my jacket. One message. Unknown number. You should have signed the easement. I read it twice while another section of railing collapsed. 3 months earlier, Silver Ridge HOA President Vanessa Whitmore had offered me $12,000 for permanent commercial access across my family's land. Her luxury resort project needed my bridge. Without it, construction vehicles would have to take a 30-mile route around the eastern ridge, turning her profitable development into an expensive fantasy. I had said no. Vanessa had smiled as if I had misunderstood the question. After that came the fines, surprise inspections, forged safety complaints, and threats of emergency seizure. She called Grace an unstable community hazard in public, then called it essential infrastructure whenever she wanted control of it. Now it was burning. Across the gorge, headlights flashed between the trees. A white SUV sat near the lower gate with its engine running. Even through smoke and distance, I recognized the shape of Vanessa's pearl-white Range Rover. I had seen it parked outside every board meeting, every county hearing, and every inspection she arranged against me. The headlights went dark. A moment later, the SUV rolled away. My phone rang. Vanessa Whitmore. I answered without speaking. "Oh, Ethan," she said, breathless with carefully measured concern. "I just heard there may have been an accident at your bridge." Behind her voice came the soft hum of an idling engine. Then a man laughed. I watched flames climb the center tower. "An accident?" I asked. Her silence lasted half a second too long. "Old mountain structures can be unpredictable," she said. "This is exactly why the HOA offered to take responsibility." The final main cable glowed red through the smoke. Vanessa believed I was trapped. With Grace gone, she could block the lower trail, declare the property inaccessible, and use the emergency she created to force me off my own land. She had calculated everything except who I was. She didn't know the bridge carried infrared cameras inside both towers. She didn't know thermal sensors monitored every support. She didn't know the full-resolution recordings were stored inside a sealed forensic unit while backup images transmitted to an encrypted server beyond the mountain. The cable snapped. Grace folded into the gorge in a storm of sparks, burning timber, and screaming steel. Vanessa exhaled softly into the phone. She thought that sound meant victory. I stared at the fire reflected against the canyon walls and felt my fear settle into something colder. "Vanessa," I said, "you should leave your phone on." "Why?" "Because someone will need to tell you when they arrive." She disconnected. Below me, the bridge burned. Inside the eastern tower, a red indicator continued blinking through the smoke. Recording. My name is Ethan Caldwell, and for most of my life, Grace Bridge was more than a way across the gorge. It was proof that my family never surrendered easily. My grandfather, Walter Caldwell, bought the mountain in 1966, when the eastern ridge was considered useless timberland. No paved roads, no electricity, no neighbors complaining about property values. Just 200 acres of cedar, granite, and weather that could change before a man finished his coffee. He built the cabin with hand tools and salvaged lumber. Then the flood came. In the spring of 1974, 3 days of rain erased the old logging road and trapped my grandparents above the gorge. My grandmother was 8 months pregnant with my father. When her blood pressure spiked, Walter carried her 6 miles through mud to reach a forestry truck. He began designing Grace the following morning. The bridge took 3 summers to finish. Walter bought surplus steel cables from a closed mine, milled Douglas fir for the deck, and anchored both towers directly into the mountain. He named it after my grandmother, although he always claimed the word represented what kept people standing when strength ran out. I learned to cross it before I learned to ride a bicycle. I remember my small hands wrapped around the cold railing while the deck shifted beneath my boots. Wind rose through the gorge, carrying the smell of wet stone and pine needles. Walter walked behind me without touching my shoulder. "Don't fight the movement," he said. "Understand what is holding you." That sentence followed me into engineering school. It followed me through 18 years of federal disaster work, where I inspected bridges after hurricanes, designed temporary crossings for wildfire evacuations, and crawled beneath collapsed overpasses while concrete dust filled my teeth. I learned that structures rarely fail without warning. Steel stretches, bolts deform, wood records heat. Every collapse leaves a story behind. When my father died, I returned to Caldwell Mountain and restored the cabin. My marriage had already ended, and the city felt crowded with conversations I no longer wanted. Up here, silence was honest. I reinforced Grace with new anchor plates, fire-resistant cable sleeves, and a monitoring system developed from equipment I had used in evacuation corridors. The county later listed it as a secondary emergency crossing during wildfire season because the public road below frequently washed out. For 6 years, Grace carried groceries, lumber, firefighters, lost hikers, and 1 ambulance through an ice storm. Then Vanessa Whitmore looked at it and saw profit. She never saw the grooves worn into the railing by my grandfather's hands. She never heard my father's truck approaching across the deck after a winter shift. She saw only the shortest route to her resort. Standing above the burning gorge, I pressed my palm against the surviving eastern anchor. The steel was hot. The mountain beneath it was not. Vanessa had destroyed the bridge my family built. But she had not destroyed its records, its legal protections, or the man Walter trained me to become. Grace had taught me how to recognize failure. Now it was going to teach Vanessa what caused hers. Vanessa Whitmore first came to Caldwell Mountain in a pearl-white Range Rover that looked too polished for gravel. I heard the engine before I saw it, climbing the switchback road in smooth, expensive bursts. By the time she stopped beside my workshop, pale dust had coated the lower doors and settled over the toes of her cream-colored heels. She stepped out holding a leather folder against her chest. Behind her came Martin Crow, Silver Ridge's property manager, carrying rolled construction plans under one arm and avoiding my eyes. "Mr. Caldwell," Vanessa said, extending her hand, "I believe we can solve a problem and make each other a great deal of money." Her perfume cut through the workshop air. Something floral and sharp, fighting with sawdust, machine oil, and hot steel from the bracket I had been grinding. I did not take her hand. What problem? Her smile held, but only because she had practiced it. Martin spread the plans across my workbench without asking. The drawings showed 42 luxury homes covering the Eastern Ridge, along with a private clubhouse, spa, glass restaurant, and scenic overlook. Blue lines marked utilities. Yellow blocks marked construction zones. A thick red route crossed Grace Bridge, continued through my lower pasture, and ended at the center of the proposed development. Vanessa tapped it with one manicured finger. This access corridor saves nearly $3 million in road construction. It is not an access corridor, I said. It is my bridge. The distinction is mostly administrative. No, the distinction is ownership. Martin shifted his weight. Paper whispered beneath his sleeve. Vanessa opened the folder and slid a contract toward me. $12,000 for a permanent commercial easement across my bridge and land. I read the first page, then pushed it back. You left out 2 zeros. For the first time, her expression changed. Only slightly. The corners of her mouth tightened, and one finger stopped tapping the workbench. We believe the offer is generous. You believe I am stupid. Rain began ticking against the metal roof. Vanessa glanced around the workshop, the old tools, patched concrete, welding cables, and boots drying beside the heater. She saw a man living alone in a mountain cabin and decided pressure would be cheaper than negotiation. The Silver Ridge Board considers grace essential to community expansion, she said. Residents have used it during emergencies. That creates a history of shared access. It creates gratitude, not ownership. Her voice lost its sweetness. Projects of this size do not stop because one person refuses to cooperate. Then build somewhere else. She rolled the contract into the folder with slow, controlled movements. Within a week, the first violation notice arrived. Unauthorized exterior lighting. Then came excessive workshop noise, non-compliant bridge paint, unsafe vegetation, and improper storage of construction materials. The bridge had existed decades before Silver Ridge, but Vanessa cited HOA standards as if age itself were a violation. Inspectors began appearing without warning. Someone reported fuel contamination near my generator. Someone claimed Grace swayed dangerously in light wind. Animal control received a complaint about aggressive dogs, although I had not owned one in 8 years. At the next HOA meeting, Vanessa projected photographs of rust on an unused anchor plate and called me a threat to community safety. Then she looked directly into Daniel Price's recording phone. Mr. Caldwell will cooperate, she said. He simply does not understand his position yet. Watching from my kitchen, I could hear the confidence in her voice. She thought she was beginning a negotiation. I knew she had just declared war. Vanessa stopped pretending she wanted cooperation on a Monday morning. At 6:14, the hydraulic hiss of a delivery truck backing toward Grace pulled me out of the workshop. I had ordered treated timber, replacement brackets, and 2 drums of preservative for routine maintenance. The driver stood beside his cab with a clipboard while Martin Crow blocked the bridge entrance using a black HOA security vehicle. Temporary safety restriction, Martin said, raising a laminated notice. I took the paper from him. No county seal. No inspector's signature. Just Vanessa's name printed above the Silver Ridge logo. This has no legal authority. It has board authorization. That is not the same thing. The driver glanced at his schedule, then at the gorge. He had 12 more stops and no reason to enter a neighborhood war. 10 minutes later, I watched $6,000 worth of materials disappear down the mountain. By noon, the power went out. The workshop lights blinked once. My ventilation fans slowed into silence. The refrigerator stopped humming inside the cabin, leaving only the ticking of cooling metal and the smell of warm insulation. My account was current. The utility representative told me an authorized community manager had reported the property vacant and requested an emergency disconnection because of wildfire risk. Vanessa had used my parcel number, HOA letterhead, and a forged authorization form. I switched on the generator and saved the call recording. The water stopped the next morning. Silver Ridge controlled a private supply line serving the lower ridge, but my family's access agreement predated the HOA by 23 years. Someone closed the valve anyway. Then came the inspectors. Roger Hale from the county building office arrived with Martin and spent 11 minutes photographing Grace from angles designed to make it look unstable. He never inspected the anchor bolts, never measured cable tension, never stepped onto the deck. That afternoon, an orange notice appeared on my gate. Temporary emergency access order. According to Roger's report, my home could be declared uninhabitable if the bridge became unavailable. The language caught my attention. Not unsafe, unavailable. That evening, Daniel Price streamed the emergency HOA meeting from his phone. I watched from my kitchen while the generator vibrated beneath the floorboards. Vanessa stood under fluorescent lights with photographs of Grace projected behind her. Mr. Caldwell's refusal to cooperate threatens every resident on the Eastern Ridge, she said. If the bridge fails, the board must assume control of the access corridor immediately. Every member voted yes. The following morning, red survey stakes appeared along my fence. Trees were marked for removal. A bulldozer idled near the lower gate, diesel fumes hanging in the cold air. I walked down and stood in front of it. Vanessa lowered the window of her Range Rover. "You can sign willingly," she said, "or the emergency order will solve this for us." Rain traced silver lines across her door. I raised my phone and photographed the bulldozer, the survey stakes, and her face. Then I noticed an orange gasoline can behind her rear seat. New plastic, black cap, half full. Vanessa followed my eyes. Her hand moved quickly toward the window controls. The glass rose between us. That was the moment the whole plan became clear. The forged orders were not meant to take the bridge. They were meant to explain why it was gone. By sunrise, Vanessa had sealed both ends of the mountain. A steel barrier blocked the lower road, chained between concrete blocks and marked with a printed sign that read, "Unsafe area. HOA authorization required." On my side of the gorge, Grace was a blackened skeleton hanging over smoke and darkness. The generator coughed beneath the workshop. Then the water stopped. I turned the kitchen faucet and heard nothing but air rattling through the pipes. Electricity, water, vehicle access. Vanessa was tightening the trap one system at a time. At 8:06, a county truck stopped beside the barrier. Through binoculars, I watched Roger Hale step out with Martin Crow. Roger unfolded a red notice across the hood, while Martin pointed toward my cabin like a man identifying property he had already purchased. My phone rang. "Mr. Caldwell," Roger said, "your residence has been declared temporarily uninhabitable due to loss of emergency access." "Who caused the loss of access?" He ignored the question. "You have 72 hours to vacate." I looked at the burning gap where my bridge had been. "How do you suggest I leave?" Silence. Behind Roger, Martin smiled. That was the design. Vanessa had destroyed my only road, then used the missing road as legal grounds to remove me. Once the county declared the property abandoned, Silver Ridge could request emergency control, clear my lower pasture, and begin construction before any court heard my appeal. It was not clever. It was organized. At noon, a drone appeared above the cabin. Its rotors buzzed over the roof, photographing my workshop, fuel shed, windows, and empty driveway. Then a speaker beneath it crackled. "Mr. Caldwell, remain inside and await evacuation instructions." I raised my phone and recorded the drone. They wanted me visible, frightened, and obedient. Instead, I entered the workshop and unlocked the steel cabinet behind my drafting table. Inside were climbing ropes, rescue anchors, thermal blankets, an emergency radio, and topographic maps from my wildfire survey days. Grace was the only vehicle crossing. It was never my only way out. 2 miles north, hidden beneath cedar and rockfall, an abandoned rescue route descended into the gorge and climbed toward an old forestry station. Too steep for trucks, too narrow for construction crews, perfect for someone Vanessa believed was trapped. Before leaving, I opened the bridge archive. The cameras stored full-resolution footage inside a sealed forensic recorder while lower-quality backup clips transmitted beyond the mountain. At 2:11 a.m., 4 people entered Grace. Roger carried 2 gasoline cans. Martin soaked the center supports. Then Vanessa's voice came through the audio. Once it drops, Caldwell cannot stop the emergency order. At 2:16, Martin struck the match. I copied the files to 2 encrypted drives, wrapped the recorder in waterproof bags, and packed it beside my rope. Outside, the drone hovered over the cabin. I left a lamp burning in the upstairs window, crossed behind the workshop, and disappeared into the trees. Vanessa had blocked every road. She never thought to study the mountain. The rescue trail began behind a wall of cedar roots 50 yards north of the workshop. Rain had turned the slope into black mud. Every step pulled at my boots while wet branches scraped across my jacket and smoke from Grace drifted through the trees behind me. The forensic recorder rested inside my pack, sealed in 2 waterproof bags. It weighed less than 4 pounds. It carried enough evidence to bury Silver Ridge. The trail dropped sharply toward Caldwell Creek, following an old wildfire route cut before the county built the lower road. Most of the markers had vanished beneath moss, but I knew the terrain by shape. The split granite slab, the leaning cedar, the narrow ledge where the gorge opened beneath your feet without warning. Halfway down, I reached the first anchor point. My grandfather had installed the original iron ring in 1978. I replaced it years later with a stainless rescue bolt and covered it with bark-colored sealant so hikers would never notice. I clipped my rope into the anchor and leaned over the drop. 300 feet below, the creek moved between boulders like dark glass. Above me, the remains of Grace hissed in the rain. Burned cables hung across the canyon, swaying slowly in the wind. The descent took 43 minutes. The climb on the northern wall took nearly 2 hours. By the time I reached the abandoned forestry station, sweat had soaked my shirt and blood ran from a cut across my palm. The building smelled of wet plywood, rust, and old animal nests. 2 windows were broken. The roof sagged above the eastern room, but the emergency satellite terminal still stood inside a steel cabinet. I had helped install it during the Red Valley Wildfire Project, and my consulting credentials remained active under the county's disaster response agreement. Vanessa had cut power to my house. She had not cut the mountain's emergency network. I connected the recorder to my laptop and opened the original files. The infrared footage showed 4 figures crossing Grace at 2:11 a.m. Vanessa wore a dark raincoat, but her face became visible when she turned toward Martin. Roger carried 2 gasoline cans. The remaining man was a contractor from the bulldozer crew. The audio was clean. "Center supports first," Vanessa said. "Once it drops, Caldwell cannot stop the emergency order." Roger hesitated. "What if the fire spreads?" Martin laughed. "Then it looks more accidental." The second camera captured Vanessa removing her hood beside the western tower. Her face filled the frame without shadow or distortion. Then I opened the sensor logs. At 2:14, Grace's emergency beacon had activated automatically. The bridge was registered under a federal wildfire mitigation grant and protected by a recorded evacuation easement. Destroying it had not merely damaged private property. It had disabled protected emergency infrastructure during active fire season. I uploaded the footage, sensor data, forged notices, and utility records to 3 secure locations. Then I sent the complete package to Special Agent Rachel Monroe, an ATF investigator I had worked with after the Red Valley fires. Her response arrived 4 minutes later. "Stay where you are. Preserve the originals. My team is on the way." Outside, a mechanical hum grew louder. Vanessa's drone rose above the trees and turned toward the broken windows. I closed the laptop and stepped into the shadows. For the first time since Grace burned, Vanessa was searching in the right place. She was simply several hours too late. Rachel Monroe arrived without sirens. At 4:42 that afternoon, a dark green Forest Service truck stopped beside the abandoned station, followed by 2 unmarked SUVs streaked with mountain dust. Rachel stepped out wearing field boots, a gray jacket, and the expression of someone who had already decided this was no longer a neighborhood dispute. She did not shake my hand. Show me the originals. Inside the station, rain tapped through holes in the roof while I placed the sealed recorder on a metal desk. An ATF fire investigator photographed the casing, documented the serial number, and cut the evidence seal beneath Rachel's camera. We watched the footage once. Vanessa crossed Grace. Roger carried gasoline. Martin soaked the center supports. Then Vanessa's voice filled the room. Once it drops, Caldwell cannot stop the emergency order. Rachel paused the recording. That sentence gives us motive, planning, and conspiracy. Another agent opened the emergency corridor files. The federal wildfire grant, recorded evacuation easement, inspection history, and beacon logs matched the timestamps exactly. Grace had transmitted a distress signal 3 minutes before the main span failed. Vanessa had not only burned private property. She had disabled an active evacuation route and then used the danger she created to support a fraudulent county order. Rachel looked at me. We do not arrest her tonight. I expected anger to rise. Instead, I understood. Vanessa was scheduled to announce the Silver Ridge Resort 9 days later at the clubhouse. Developers, investors, county officials, and local media had all been invited. She planned to present the destruction of Grace as proof that my land required HOA control. Rachel wanted time. More importantly, she wanted Vanessa confident. People like her become careless when a room applauds them. Over the next week, the investigation widened. Bank records showed $48,000 in HOA funds transferred to Martin's private consulting company. Roger received a payment 3 days before signing the emergency access report. Security footage from a gas station showed Martin buying 2 orange fuel cans, while Vanessa's Range Rover waited beside the pumps. The resort developer had also purchased delay insurance covering losses caused by an uncooperative adjacent landowner. The fire was not rage. It was strategy. Rachel's team interviewed the bulldozer contractor, utility employees, and 2 board members who had approved payments without reading the invoices. One of them surrendered emails in which Vanessa described my property as the final obstacle. Daniel Price agreed to attend the announcement and record everything from the audience. That evening, Silver Ridge posted a photograph of Vanessa standing beside the ruins of Grace. Her expression was arranged into grief. The caption praised her leadership during a tragic infrastructure failure. The gasoline cans were gone from her vehicle. It no longer mattered. At dawn on the 9th day, Rachel handed me a clean shirt and a temporary federal visitor badge. Below us, the Silver Ridge clubhouse glowed with television lights and polished glass. "Ready?" she asked. I looked toward the building where Vanessa planned to sell my mountain. "She thinks I am still trapped." Rachel opened the SUV door. "Then let us not disappoint her too early." The Silver Ridge clubhouse smelled like fresh paint, expensive coffee, and fear disguised as confidence. Vanessa stood beneath a white banner stretched across the stage. The future of mountain living. Behind her, a polished rendering showed glass houses climbing the eastern ridge. A bright access road crossed the gorge exactly where Grace had stood, as if my bridge, my land, and my refusal had already been erased. Investors filled the front row. County officials sat behind them. 2 local television cameras pointed toward the podium. Martin Crow adjusted the microphone while Roger Hale remained near the sidewall, sweating beneath the air conditioning. Vanessa smiled into the lights. Yesterday's tragic bridge failure proved that vital community infrastructure cannot remain under the control of one uncooperative individual. I opened the rear doors. The hinges gave a soft metallic groan. Every conversation stopped. Vanessa saw me first. Her smile remained in place, but her fingers tightened around the podium until the knuckles turned pale. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "we were informed you had evacuated the property." "I did." Her eyes shifted toward the security guards. "Then you are trespassing. That is not your biggest problem this morning." Rachel Monroe entered behind me. 6 federal agents followed her, their jackets marked ATF and FBI. A Forest Service investigator carried a sealed evidence case. The room went so quiet I could hear the projector fan turning above us. Roger moved toward the side exit. 2 agents stepped into his path. Rachel climbed onto the stage and handed Vanessa a folded document. Vanessa Whitmore, you are under arrest pursuant to a federal warrant for conspiracy, arson-related offenses, wire fraud, bribery, obstruction, and destruction of protected emergency infrastructure. A thin laugh escaped Vanessa's throat. This is ridiculous. The bridge failed because Mr. Caldwell neglected it. Rachel nodded toward the projection booth. The resort rendering vanished. Infrared footage appeared. Four figures crossed Grace at 2:11 in the morning. The audience watched Roger carry 2 orange gasoline cans. They watched Martin pour fuel across the center supports. Then Vanessa removed her hood and pointed toward the western tower. Her recorded voice filled the clubhouse. Once it drops, Caldwell cannot stop the emergency order. Nobody moved. Martin's face turned gray. Roger whispered something I could not hear. Vanessa stared at the screen as if refusing to recognize herself might change what everyone had seen. That video is fabricated. Rachel displayed the sensor timestamps, emergency beacon logs, gas station footage, bank transfers, forged utility request, and Roger's payment. Then came the insurance policy covering delays caused by an uncooperative landowner. The resort developer stood so quickly his chair crashed backward. You told us the fire was accidental. Vanessa stepped away from the podium. The agents closed around her. For the first time, the polished smile disappeared. You ruined everything, she said to me. No, I looked at Grace burning on the screen behind her. You did that when you struck the match. Handcuffs clicked around Martin's wrists. Roger began talking before an agent even touched him. Vanessa remained silent as Rachel secured her hands and led her past the investors she had planned to impress. Outside, cameras recorded the HOA president being placed into an unmarked vehicle beneath her banner about the future. By noon, the resort permits were suspended. By evening, Silver Ridge's accounts were frozen. Vanessa had burned my bridge to trap me. Instead, she built the road that led federal agents directly to her. Grace returned to Caldwell Mountain 18 months later. The first steel section arrived before sunrise on a flatbed truck, its tires grinding over the same gravel Vanessa's crews had once tried to claim. Cold mist filled the gorge. Diesel fumes mixed with wet cedar, welding smoke, and coffee poured from dented thermoses. This time, nobody blocked the road. Federal restitution covered part of the reconstruction. Silver Ridge's insurance carrier paid the remainder after investigators proved the board had concealed the resort conspiracy. Vanessa's Range Rover, investment accounts, and mountain property were seized. Martin surrendered his contractor's license. Roger Hale pleaded guilty, testified against the others, and admitted he had signed the emergency order before Grace ever burned. Vanessa refused every deal. She went to trial wearing a navy suit and the same controlled expression she had carried into every HOA meeting. Prosecutors played her recorded sentence 7 times. Once it drops, Caldwell cannot stop the emergency order. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. She was convicted of conspiracy, wire fraud, bribery, obstruction, and federal arson-related offenses tied to the protected evacuation route. The judge sentenced her to 12 years in prison and ordered restitution to every homeowner whose dues had financed her private development scheme. The resort permits were permanently revoked. The developer withdrew the project. Over the following months, Silver Ridge residents voted to dissolve the HOA and replace it with a limited road maintenance association whose authority fit on one page. Daniel Price became treasurer because nobody trusted anyone who actually wanted the position. Monthly fees dropped by more than half. The eastern ridge remained forest. I redesigned Grace with weathering steel, fire-resistant decking, redundant suspension cables, and a suppression line connected to a buried water tank. The new bridge still carried thermal sensors and infrared cameras, but it was not built from fear. It was built to endure. On opening morning, neighbors gathered beside the western tower. Children touched the cool railing. Firefighters tested the emergency lane. An ambulance crossed slowly, its tires producing a steady hum over the deck before disappearing among the cedars. My grandfather would have recognized that sound. Near the entrance, I installed a small steel plaque. I did not put Vanessa's name on it. People like her spend their lives trying to carve themselves into everything they control. I would not give her another monument. The plaque read, Grace Bridge Private Property Protected Emergency Access, rebuilt after the Silver Ridge fire below it. In smaller letters, I added the lesson the mountain had taught me. Justice isn't loud. It's smart, patient, and inevitable. That evening, I walked to the center of the span as sunset poured copper light into the gorge. Wind moved beneath the deck. The cables answered with a low metallic note. For months, I had heard grace collapsing in my dreams. Now I heard strength carrying weight. Vanessa believed fire would erase my choices, isolate me, and force me to surrender the land my family had protected for generations. Instead, the flames exposed every payment, forged document, threat, and official who thought an HOA title placed them above the law. She tried to trap me on the mountain. All she trapped was herself. A truck approached from the valley, and the bridge trembled gently beneath my boots. I placed my hand on the railing. Grace held firm. So did I.